Hi everyone, thanks for coming back to another episode of Declan's Autism Journey podcast. I'm always excited that you're here. And today I really wanted to focus on us pivoting, which is, if you've been following our journey, you know that is kind of the mantra that we have developed for our family, and that as things arise, we just pivot. And that was something that was really hard in the beginning. Didn't know if pivoting was right. I didn't know if I should be listening to my gut. There were so many things that I just didn't know what to do. And so now, being on this journey for almost 3 years, we are really listening to what our gut is telling us, and we're making choices based on that. And so the biggest thing and the newest thing in Declan's life and related to his therapy is that we've pivoted away from RPM and we are embarking on Speller's method. Very similar. I don't know the history of both or kind of how they came to be. I don't think one is right and one is wrong. I just think that, I was all gung-ho to take Declan to Texas to meet the inventor and creator of RPM, Soma. And I'm sure she's amazing and she's wonderful. But there was just something that kept kind of nagging me a little bit, like that I just didn't want to go. And that is really out of character for me, especially when I've got these things for Declan. I'm usually all in 100% and there's kind of no stopping me. But I just was like, so weird that I've got this feeling. But I'm still going to do it. I want Declan more than anything to become an independent speller. And, we'll get into the reasons why later, but number one is for school and for him to be able to show people that it's truly him communicating and not me as a facilitator helping, or doing the communication completely as some people think and, even allege. So anywho, I had this thought, but Dr. M introduced us to RPM. Nancy, our RPM specialist at Dr. M's, who's one of my favorite humans and is actually going to be a guest on my podcast in a couple weeks. And I'm so excited. I talked to her. I was kind of having an emotional breakdown one day, and I'm texting her and I'm like, I just don't know. Something's telling me I shouldn't go. I don't know what it is. We had hotel, airfare, car rental. I had everything booked for Declan and I. And so I really was like, I just need to go and I need to stop listening to my gut. And then all of a sudden, all of these different Speller's method things started coming into my life through different avenues. And so one was a Speller's documentary, which then led me to buying this book, the Speller's Guidebook, which I just have devoured. And the Speller's documentary, if you follow me on Instagram, or even I have a private Facebook, I've put it out there to everyone that has been touched by Declan and our family's journey with non-speaking autism, to please take an hour and a half and watch Speller's. It will truly just change your life. And I would say the same for anyone watching this. But anyhow, this stuff all started to come into my world, and I was like, it's really weird. And then a Speller's method facility opened in Charleston, South Carolina. And, I'm kind of like, where I'm at on my journey is that, if we can treat with the creator or the inventor or whomever we feel knows the most about what they're talking about, we're going right to that person. It's just like Dr. Malillo. To be able to treat with him is such a gift, and that is never, ever lost on myself, my husband, our entire family. To treat with him is truly a gift. And I felt that same way for Speller's. So when I watched the documentary, and it's co-founded by two women, one in San Diego and one in Tampa, I immediately hopped on and booked an info session with Tampa and was like, okay, we're pivoting, we're going to Tampa. And then even though I knew that this center had opened in Charleston, but I was like, we have spent so much time, so much money, so much hope, so much energy on things that just didn't work out. But I knew that I just had this gut that Speller's was the right mode for Declan and for us. And so, but I was like, I'm not going to Charleston. Like, she's not one of the co-founders. And so Tim and I had a conversation with the Tampa office, and quickly learned that Brooke here in Charleston had trained under Dawn Marie in San Diego for several years. She's actually in the documentary Spellers. Peripherally, she's not featured, but she's in there. And they felt very confident that she has a really incredible skill set and will be a great addition to Declan's team. And in addition to the fact that she'd be our only local provider that's truly, has a meaningful seat on his bus. We've got other providers, but, do they really make a difference in his autism life? And the answer is no. It's always been no, right? Dr. M's in New York. We've also started treating with his partner, who's Dr. Peter Schreier out of Atlanta. Really from a gut perspective, we really haven't had a chance to really dive into that too much, but it's all coming, it's all happening. And so anyhow, we had our first session with Declan last week, and I'm all in. I'm mom, I drive this bus, I'm all in on this, and I want everyone else around me to be as all in. But I know that with the way Declan was communicating, I was giving him some pressure. I knew it was him communicating, but the fact that he wasn't truly doing it independently led to doubts, which again, I've said before, I totally get. And so for this, what we've just decided to do is we're just kind of pausing, we're resetting, we're letting Brooke take the wheel here, which is hard for me, but I'm letting her do it. And we're sitting back, and Tim and I are just observing for the first couple sessions, and then we'll get to a point where we are every day practicing, because it's all about practicing and working really hard, and Declan will do it. I have no doubts about it. So even in the first session, Declan and Brooke were sitting basically at a little desk facing a wall, and Tim and I were behind them, and Tim and I just kept looking at each other like, oh my God, he's like doing it independently. The idea is they use stencil boards to start him, and he's holding a little pencil and he pokes through the letter. And because Speller's method believes that autism is a motor impairment, not a cognitive one, they're really motor coaching him. So they presume competence. So the first thing she said to him, which is exactly what you see in the video, in the documentary Spellers, she was just so kind and so sweet and so gentle. But the first really important thing she said to him, other than "Hi, Declan," was, I know how smart you are. And I know you're going to do this, and I know you can do it. And it still brought me to tears, even though I probably knew that was going to happen. We're a family coming in who doesn't have to be sold on the fact that Declan's a genius. I don't have to be sold on that. I know that. What I just need is help with him to get it out. And so, Tim and I just kept looking as she's reading passages, and then she would ask him to spell certain words, and he would do it. And he needed a little coaching, but there was none of this, what I was doing with him, like giving him pressure. He was holding like a weighted stylus to give him that pressure and that input, and then also like poking through the stencil, which provided him with this sensory input that he needed. And it was, Tim and I were just kept looking at you like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is happening. Like, it's session 1 and he's already doing it. It's unbelievable. So we're going to go back every week. And, the first couple sessions we've agreed, like I said, Brooke is driving his bus right now in this realm, and I'm okay with it. And then eventually we'll take it back over, and ultimately we will become the point people for his training and is really his communication partner. And I will get trained first, and then Tim will get trained. And then hopefully we can, the sky's the limit for him once he can communicate. I have no doubt about that. And I used to think, when we started this, it was so scary. And I've said that so many times, like, it's scary. And if you watch my last episode, my sister said one of her last questions was, what's what is the biggest gift that autism has brought your family? And I answered it honestly, in that had she asked me that 2 years ago, I probably couldn't have answered it, because I was still so scared. We hadn't uncovered Declan yet. We hadn't found Dr. Malillo. We hadn't found spellers and RPM, which have all been huge game changers for all of us. And so, when I look at Declan's future now, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to kill it. He is going to be, and I've been saying this, and Tim is like, you need to stop saying it. But I said in an IEP meeting, he's going to be valedictorian of the general education population. And I have no doubt about it. And I don't care what anyone thinks about that statement. And I got a lot, you can imagine, we're in an IEP meeting. And, I think what they're used to is parents, not questioning and not challenging and I'm not saying that's wrong. I recognize that I'm probably a very different parent than what they're used to. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's fine. I don't really care what they think of me, right? Like, I just don't. I'm fighting for my child. And what I do try to do is really maintain my composure, right? Even if someone says something ignorant, which of course always happens. But try to really keep control of my own emotions. It's not easy. Some days are better than others. But at the end of the day, I do want to partner with his educators. Whether these people are the right fit or not, again, I think they're really kind to him. I think they're probably just, in general, what I'm going to get right in the general education system. And so that's up to Tim and I to figure out if they're the right fit for us. And we'll get there. Right now, what I'm most focused on is us trying to still figure Declan out and uncover Declan and set him up to be in a place where he is fully communicating on his own. And, he might need a communication partner, like sitting next to him and helping him either hold a letter board or eventually maybe hold a keyboard, or potentially a really long-term goal is that he the keyboard is on a stand and he can type on his own. We're just learning all of this stuff ourselves, and I'm open to all of it because I know it's all uncovering Declan. But I just want to go back a little bit to the school and the IEP meeting, and I think if you want to stay in the box, like, you're golden, right? Like, just don't challenge the system, don't buck the system, and you're good. And that's just not my style. It's never been. And especially when I'm advocating for my child who cannot speak. It is definitely not my scene. So, many people have said, like, you just got to kind of tamper your excitement, like, just kind of go in and, like, smile and nod, right? And because knowing that guidance came from knowing that Tim and I were doing everything at home that Declan needed. So, originally my own request from school was just be kind to him, treat him appropriately. And I kind of really, even though I knew Declan was a genius and so smart, I just felt like I was kind of giving the school system a pass to, like, not necessarily educate him. I wasn't really holding them to a specific standard. And so, the more I read and the more confident I become in knowing who Declan is, and really reading has been the best gift. Finding tools and resources that are speaking to me about what's the right thing for Declan. that's kind of just keeps changing, right? That keeps me pivoting at every moment. It seems like I'm like, okay, even when I think back to when I started this podcast, I was thinking a certain way about certain things, and now I think really differently. And that's just the journey we're on. And I think in 6 months, maybe I'll be pivoting again in a different area. But, where I'm at right now is I'm saying loud and clear, Declan is a genius. No one is going to be allowed to underestimate him. The expectation is, of course, that he is treated with dignity, respect, that he's appreciated for who he is, he's allowed to contribute to the classroom in his own way, and that they're educating him at age-appropriate levels. Now, I also understand. I am saying Declan is a genius. He is. There's no doubt about it. So, do I really think age-appropriate content is right for him? No. But that would be super unfair of me and unrealistic of me to say to them, you need to figure out where he is. I don't even know where he is, right? On the educational scale. I have no idea. But what I do know is presuming competence is absolutely mandatory if you are on Declan's team. And if you can't do that, then you're out. And I think, as I've made it really clear, I have no problem cutting people out. And there is no second chance in this world for us. There's just not. I referenced with the speech therapist, who is new from last year, thank goodness, that, we had a very nice dialogue about Declan, just kind of what we're doing at home, what she's doing in the classroom with him. And I shared about RPM at the time, but I had also seen spellers. So I shared that with her, and I said, I would just encourage you to watch it. I said, just mom to mom, I think you would get a lot out of it now working with a non-speaker. I mean, let's be real here. None of these people have like a plethora of exposure to non-speakers. And yet not all, so I'm going to generalize. Some of them just act like, he's a typical kid or has a typical impairment or impediment. And that just drives me nuts. This speech therapist did not do that. But I'm finding that maybe others on the team are. And so I'm just kind of seeing where this goes. But back to our conversation with my conversation with the speech therapist is, she shared with me that, she's bound by ASHA, who governs Speech and Hearing Association. She's not ethically allowed to use RPM or letterboards. And obviously I wanted to rage, right? But I didn't. And I just was like, okay. So it just made me really step back and think, why? Like, if you watch spellers alone, you know that these kids are independently either pointing to letters and spelling full sentences, thoughts out. Some that are so thoughtful and deep, and yet they can't speak. And you're going to say that's not them communicating. I mean, it just makes me crazy. It just makes me so crazy. But that's where we live right now. And so, then it's up to us to keep this conversation going. But I wanted to just circle back to the school too, because I think, there's so much room for opportunity to be sensitive to non-speakers or families, right? So Declan went to the library with his class, and he came back with a standard printout of how I can interact with my child. And so I should read a page, then he should read a page. And then, we should start with paragraphs, whatever. I mean, I just was like, I don't think that educators, again, if you're outside the box, I don't think anyone is taking the time to think about what a knife through my heart that is. Maybe it's just a piece of paper to you, but it's just another reminder that my child doesn't speak. And it's like, I always go back. And the thing that I say to people sometimes to just hit them between the eyes is like, he's 5 and I've never heard mommy. Okay. Like, I go back to that all the time. And yet this insensitive paper is coming home that now no one gave 2 craps about, but put it in a non-speaker's backpack. Another thing that happened is that, I got an assessment from the school psychologist, and in our IEP meeting, she asked me if she could do it. I gave her permission, but I was very clear that I don't put any stock into any of these tests, this testing documentation that they do. I know who Declan is. They're looking at him through one lens and one lens only, and there's no room for other views. And it's so opposite of who I know Declan is and where he's gonna go. And I'm just not putting any energy into it. I'm not giving it any energy. However, I understand she has a job to do, and I don't think any of her testing is gonna hurt Declan. So I gave her permission. Well, there's a form that I have to fill out online. One entire section is dedicated to his verbal responses. And I just was like, I've had enough. There is no regard for the families and the children who are non-speakers. I think people just, and I get it, like no one really gets this unless they live it. However, they still know he's non-speaking. And so there is so much room for opportunity in the school system from every facet. And I mean, if I could imagine doing something that would be so amazing, like I would just start a school for these kids because they deserve a place to go and they deserve to be treated with respect. And, walking into Brooke's office, that was the first meeting where I knew that Declan would be treated appropriately. Going into Dr. M's office, I had a really good idea, but I was so fragile and like so afraid to have hope that it was going to yield the outcome that we were hoping and praying for. We had been down the path so many times with so many different providers and had false hope so many times and false promises, frankly, that, I kind of, by the time we got to Dr. M, poor guy, like we were just like depleted. And I was just like, we're here, we're doing it. I doubt it's going to work, and obviously our tune changed really, really quickly the moment we started working with him and met him and his team. But so I didn't walk in there being like, this is going to be amazing. But I did with Brooke. Most times when I walk into a provider's office, I think, oh my God, here we go. Like I'm nervous, I'm anxious. Are they going to treat him appropriately? I referenced in my last episode, the emergency room doctor like moonwalking out of the room because Declan was crying and was really upset. And that's just horrific to think about. But that's kind of what we get most of the time. So anyhow, long story short, I'm so excited for our Speller's Method journey. I know Declan is going to be spelling independently. He is so tenacious. He is so driven. He's just amazing. And I just know how smart he is. And what we're learning is that this group of non-speakers that have been uncovered, that have, found their voice through spelling, all they want to do is help others. And now, granted, everyone in that Speller's documentary is a good bit older than Declan. But, the main goal of this podcast was to share our journey and hopefully help others. And so, to have found Spellers and an RPM, which is a credit to Dr. Melillo and to Nancy at Dr. Melillo's office. But, we would have never, I don't know if we would have never found this. I'm guessing it probably would have come into my life at some point, but I'm just so grateful that Declan is 5 and we have uncovered this, and, the center in Charleston opened. It's kind of like, wow, this is all crazy and happening and meant to be. And I really believe in all of those things. So, we'll just kind of see where it goes. But I really look forward to keeping everyone updated on his speller's journey. I think the more that, all of us can presume competence in these kids is the best thing that we can do for them. Ever since we met Nancy, and really once Declan started communicating with me through RPM, even though I was touching him, every day I just tell him, I know how smart you are. We're figuring you out. Like, we're doing it. Just give us some time. And it's just happening. And so I started to say what I'm so grateful for about autism. I can, for the first time, truly say, like, I'm not scared about his future. He's going to be probably invent something cool and amazing that really helps other people. Or if he doesn't, at the very minimum, he's gonna be independent. And that was the stuff that was so scary in the beginning. Now, will he always maybe need some type of a support system and something? Sure. But he will never be trapped, And I look at all of the different, every day, the therapy we do with him, lasering 13 sections of his brain, all of the other brain balance work to bring his two hemispheres more into sync. And I just know, coupled with RPM, spellers, whatever mode of communication we find for him, he's 5. He is the best teacher Tim and I have ever had. We learn life lessons every day through him. And I'm honestly just blown away by him. He is so, so smart. And I just know he's going to do amazing things. And so, the future's not scary. It's exciting. And, when we started this journey, I never thought I would have said that, ever. I mean, to think that I'm sitting here today even saying I'm so excited for him. Do we have some difficulties and battles ahead of us? Of course we do. But they're not mountains like I thought they were, right? They're manageable. They're things that we're all going to get through together. And more than anything, he's going to be able to communicate his wants and his needs and his feelings and his thoughts. And he's going to do all these just amazing things. And I'm just so grateful for all of the people that are on his bus that are truly making an impact. And so, last thing I'll end with is one of the parents in the Spellers documentary that really got that documentary going and wrote a book called Underestimated with his non-speaking son. He said, autism parents trust other autism parents. And I just was like, yeah, 100%, no question. And so, again, my road and my family's road may not be right for everybody, but hopefully it helps a few along the ways. And so we'll just keep sharing. But thanks everyone for your time today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Bye.